Hi everybody, welcome back to Sprueverse, my scale model universe. And today we have a brand new build on the bench. After getting back from Wonderfest and settling down, I've started to work on a few of my other sort of build-up kits. You know, my Back to the Future DeLorean and my DB5, and of course the new Star Trek Enterprise D. And those are the sort of what I refer to as my plug and play builds, but if you really want to see those being built by pros, go check out Wayne Green's World of Wayne, and all of those builds are available there, except for the DB5, which you can check out Steve's awesome channel, which is Scale Model Kit Review. And that's where you'll find all the information you need on how to build the DB5. But anyway, I digress. I thought it would be fun for me to get back to a resin kit. Now, the reason why I wanted to do that is because I haven't really talked about resin from a build-up perspective. I always mention it in reviews, and I've casually said you need to sort of build some skills, but I thought it would be fun to put one on the bench and build it up. This is the bubble ship from the Tom Cruise movie Oblivion, and interestingly enough, not a great box office success. I thought the premise was okay, but as I've said before, I'm just an absolute I'm a geek when it comes to spaceships and vehicles from the future. And I always thought that this bubble ship design, as well as the drone, which I also have picked up, and you can get that too, from Golden Armor, which is it's a terrific site. I picked up Wayne's ET model kit there, which went to the UK, but he sent me a drone, and I'm going to be probably building that as a twofer, I'm not sure. But today, as we start, I wanted to kind of just go to the very beginning and go, okay, how do we approach this? Well, step one is, this kit is available from Randy Cooper, and I will give you information on how to reach Randy in the description below. Because it's a little bit of a thing. You email him, he'll email you right back, usually the next day, sometimes the same day. He's very responsive. He'll tell you, basically ask you where the kit is shipping to, so he gets a handle on the shipping price, and then you can add that to the price of the kit, which is quoted on his channel. So once the kit arrives, the first thing you need to do is ask Randy for some resource photos, and he'll be kind enough to send you a WeTransfer file with all the detailed photos of how he put this together. And usually the first photo of Randy's I go straight to is the inventory picture. He's kind enough to put that in a photo, and here it is on PhilCam. You can see this is a photo of a photo of a photo. But this is your inventory. And so it's really a good idea to go through your inventory and make sure you've got everything you need. Because if there's something missing, now's the time to pick up the phone and call him and say, something's missing. And so just sort of looking at these pieces, you can see there's a couple of things I wanted to share with you. One of them is they have all of this flash on them. Now, the good news is you want to see flash with a resin kit like this. And the reason why you want to is because in transportation, if he was going to peel these off of, say, these little plates or remove a lot of this, it actually weakens the structure of this for shipping. So don't be concerned about the amount of flash that you see. Just know you've got a lot of cleanup ahead of you, and we're going to be sort of talking about that in this first episode. But this is how your pieces will arrive. Always inspect them. You're going to have some mold lines. There's going to have to be a little bit of elbow grease to get these clean. They all need to be cleaned up and sanded. But one of the other things I'll tell you about this resin is it's also very, very friendly. Now what I mean by that is it will sand very nicely. You can contour it, and as long as you have a good set of files and some good perhaps sanding sticks, you know, I get mine from Flory in the UK. These are Flory sticks, and if you've got sanding sticks and a good set of files, you're fine. So all of these seam lines and mold lines, they'll come off quite nicely. And there may even be some pieces where he has pulled it from the mold, but it was a stanchion or a block or something just to hold the piece in place. But make sure you're sure of what you're cutting before you cut, because it's easy to trim stuff off with resin. Putting it back is a whole nother story. Now, it does take Bondo quite well. There is also something called Epoxy Sculpt, and there's Epoxy Sculpt paste. And sometimes the paste will sort of self-level itself into giant holes, and you just let it dry, let it set up, and then it sands nicely. CA glue for little bubble pinholes as well will also do the trick. So that's a little bit about how it arrives. Now, the next thing you've got to do once you've taken your inventory and you're pretty sure everything is here, and I am pretty sure everything is here. I've got my clear parts in here. I'm always loath to pull those out in case they are cracked or damaged. But these seem to be okay. I've got 2 of those, and everything is here, albeit some of the pieces, like on here, I want to show you because it's very important that you see. Some of them perhaps might have a little nick or some little bubbles in them, and they may need to be cleaned up. If something is really severely broken, just take a picture of it and reach out to Randy, and I'm sure he would be kind enough to replace it. You know, he's not trying to send you a broken model, but again, we're in a different world here, so you have to have a certain level of expectation. The other thing is, you go through here and you'll see in these chairs, here's another example of it, and I'll hold them to this camera so you can see these chairs. The first thing you notice when you look at these chairs is there's a tremendous amount of detail. You've got little switches in the armrest. You've got these perhaps thigh or leg supports, you know, just like in a car that they come out to give you a more comfortable ride. They're cocooned beautifully, you know, they remind me of those Recaro sports chairs. They're very angular and clean, but there's some issues. Here in the corner, we've got some resin that has oozed out during the molding process, and it's kind of sat back there. So we're going to have to clean that out. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a very low speed, either Dremel or drill. I actually prefer the Proxxon. And at a very, very low speed with a very delicate grinder, this is a great tool because it's very precision oriented. And you can just clean that out. And we'll clean up all of these lines. We've got the same issue, unfortunately, inside these sort of Recaro thigh rests. You'll also notice there's some purple stuff in here. Now, it could be part of the mold, it could be release agent. So that all has to be removed. And when you do that, in fact, here I'm noticing that there are a couple of pinholes in the side of the chair that are going to need to be filled in, and that's fine. That's something you would expect. Unfortunately, with a mold like this, it will break down over time and have to be replaced. So depending on how many times this has been poured, you are going to expect a little bit of degradation. The other thing I'll say to you here is on the back, you can see this is one of those situations where I'm not sure whether we're supposed to either leave this on its stand here, the stand, or whether this gets removed. But we'll figure that out very quickly once we once we determine sort of the engineering of it all. We'll know exactly what we have to do. And so there's an awful lot of cleanup that has to be done here, and I would say this is going to be what I'm going to be spending the next several hours doing, is sort of just delicately going through all of these and looking to see, where I've got problems and where I've got recesses where something is supposed to fit into something else. Does it sit in there nicely? I can see that this is the rotor. The rear of the rotor, and obviously there's a lot of flash here that has to be removed, and so we'll do that carefully. But there's also the what I call the sort of the mold stabilizing holder, and so I'm not entirely sure how this laid in the mold, whether it was this way, or this way, but this is obviously what held this up so that the resin could be poured around it. Now, obviously, all this has to be removed. What you never want to do is try to snap this. You always want to carefully cut this. I tend to score it and then use a very sharp X-Acto saw to take that off and then carefully grind it down. Now, I have a belt sander, which I use to oftentimes drag around pieces and contour them, or to get rid of chunks of resin. But if it's just you, then just take your time. Never snap at these things. And obviously there's grid lines in here, and some of them I can see just need to be scored out. So there's quite a bit of work to do with these pieces. But other than that, everything looks pretty good. I'm not sure whether we'll be how much we'll be lighting in this, but for sure we've got a lot of cleanup to do. All of these little there's flash behind these grills that need to be drilled out. Now he has provided us with, interestingly enough, this bar, because obviously it's got to hold quite a bit, and I think from just from an engineering standpoint, it clearly made sense to put this on a bar so that we can we can actually stabilize this unit quite well. And then of course he's given us a base, so that's very cool, and we have an even larger piece that sits below it, and we have a decal sheet that goes with it. Now, the next thing I want to say is, once all this is cleaned up, and while you're cleaning it up, please, this is resin. Be in a well-ventilated area. You may want to use a respirator. You don't want to be breathing in this dust. It's not a good idea. If you can sit outside under a tree, put some newspaper or a drop cloth down and sit out somewhere, that would be preferred. I have a very well ventilated shop here. I also have filtration systems, and I also have a vacuum cleaner and a respirator mask. So I will most likely, with something like this, once I start sanding, be doing it under a controlled situation. But I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to please be very careful when you're handling resin. Now, this is not going to kill you. You can get it on your hands. It's fine. What we don't want is the dust going into our mouth. That's what we don't want to do. Okay, so let's assume everything is cleaned up, guys. And everything on the bench is going to be cleaned up the next time you see it, and we'll be ready to go to the next step. But what you're not going to see me do is every single piece here is going to go into a warm water bath, very warm water, not boiling hot water and not cold, warm water with some either Palmolive or Dove washing liquid, which is a very good degreaser. And what that is going to do is make sure that all of these surfaces have no other release agent or chemicals on them that could affect the paint from bonding to it. In the past, I've had, you know, a few problems, but not too many. And surprisingly, it took a couple of washes for me to get those pieces to where you're not going to have any issues. Now there are things that I use, like the adhesion promoter, which is a very good, Duplo Color makes one, and of course their primer, filler primer, their gray primer filler, which we'll be using on this, is excellent as well. But you do want to make sure that everything is washed and clean, and that is critical before you get started. So that's kind of a tour of all of the pieces. I'm going to go away now and clean all of this up, and through the magic of television, the next time we chat here, these will all be washed and cleaned and ready to go, and we'll start looking at sub-assemblies, okay? Okay, so work continues on the bubble ship from the movie Oblivion, which was made in 2012-13. Starring, of course, Tom Cruise. We continue with this resin kit from Randy Cooper. Now, when a Randy Cooper kit arrives, you do not get instructions. He is and will be more than happy to help you with anything you want if you send him an email. And he sends us some really detailed photos of his build-up and some instructions as well. When I say you have to have a certain level of skill, it does require you to sort of have worked your way through one of these things before, because when all the pieces arrive, and some of the resin pieces like this one here, you know, they're on these sort of trees, which is how the resin kits were poured. And some of them have a tremendous amount of detail in them and some of them don't. Now what I have done actually with this one, and I will put it on fill can quickly because I do think it's worth it, is that I want you to see something here because I think it's very important. And that is, you'll notice that what I have done is I have cut some tubing and I have replaced the pieces that were broken or chipped. They obviously need to be filed down and cleaned up. Now, the detail on these are quite good, but with all due respect to Randy, a lot of it is quite crude and needs to be cleaned up. And that's no disrespect to him. He does not pretend to be putting out something for beginners. These are kits for skilled model makers who want these particular subjects either in a large scale format or of subjects that are just simply not available on the open market. And these garage kits, or small batch manufacturing kits as I like to refer to them, you have to expect that you're going to have to do a lot of work. If you look at this rim right here, you'll notice that it's not a perfect circle. Some of it is due to my inaccurate sanding. Some of it is just because where the resin parts left the mold, they were too thick and you just simply couldn't sand it down correctly. And if you don't have some kind of a perfect boring machine, you know, that's of that size, you're not going to get a perfect circle. But the fact of the matter is this piece, once it's sealed down on here, and I'm able to put just a little bit of epoxy putty in here, and I'm probably going to use something like Epoxy Sculpt, which it's a two-part. I could even use Milliput as well, maybe I will, but it's a two-part putty, and it works very well in water. And so what you're able to do is just clean up a lot of these lines, and some of them will have to be rescored as well. But there's an awful lot of that has to happen. Sometimes I use a little bit of Bondo, but I think it really depends what you're trying to do. If it's a very large seam or a step or something like that where you have to build something up, then Bondo is best. But for the most part, if there's no structural there's nothing structural about it, and it doesn't have to hold an awful lot of weight, then I would go with the Epoxy Sculpt or the Milliput, and that's probably your best way to clean these up. And then, of course, you sort of you continue to clean these up. I've deliberately left this one like this so you can see some of the challenges we have. Let me put this on fill cam as well, just so that you can see this close up. Now, you'll notice here that we have a tremendous amount of resin that I'm having to chip away at and clean up. And when you do, you sort of end up with something that you have to end up with something that's an awful lot cleaner than that. And the reality is, when you do that, you notice that some of these pieces just simply are not going together nicely. They're just not. Even though he kindly tells you that pieces key together, this particular piece was so badly disfigured on one side of it that it just simply isn't flush. But fear not. The great thing about this is, I apologize for my throat. The great thing about this is that once we have this glued together with just what I like to do is I like to use a little CA glue just to tack it in place, and then when I've got something that is as guys, I apologize, something that is as bad as this, then and it's fighting me, it just doesn't want to sit there while I hold it to camera, but I'm going to try here and not let it win the day. You'll notice that it's just too much of a gap, and I want to make sure that I've got some decent structural integrity here. So what I'll do is once this is dry and I'm able to put the Epoxy Sculpt in here and clean this up, then I can go ahead and sand it. And so that's one of the trials and tribulations of these things. But you'll notice here that there are several parts to this, and this is obviously one of the two engines. And you've got this clear piece which attaches to the back of the rear engine mount. Now he does give you the option to leave the engines wide open or leave them closed, but I just think they look a lot cleaner in the closed position. Now I am not lighting this kit. You certainly could. You could get these engines glowing in the back and that would be terrific. But there's not an awful lot of places to put wires in this, and I just don't want to start attacking this thing. It's going to be hard enough as it is to get it cleaned up and looking really sharp. So the last thing I want to do now is add the element of wiring to it, but you certainly could. And that's why he gives you these parts. But you'll notice that what you have to do here is you essentially put this into the back of this cowling, and this drops in like this, and the whole thing comes together sort of like this. Yeah, I'm gonna just be fighting with this on camera, and then that drops into here, and then that's gonna slide on to this crossbar here, which is my next nightmare. And I don't say that in a mean way. I say it because, wow, I want you to see how much work it is to clean these things up and get them looking really sharp. But once you do, they are great fun. Now, when my piece arrived, this was one entire piece, and I noticed when it arrived that this bar was bent, and I couldn't figure out why it had been bent. It looks like it was bent to deliberately make it fit in this groove right here. And but the thing then is you get this massive piece which holds the tail rotor in place, which I've had to literally, I've had to with one of my grinders and shapers, I've used a pretty large piece here, and what I've done is I've drummeled out this line. I measured it so that I knew that it sit perfectly with the bottom piece, and I was able to get these two to connect. Now you're going to have a line here. He says you're going to have one. He apologizes in advance for that. But what we're going to do is we are going to be able to putty that in and make that go away. But one of the challenges we have is that the lights for this, the lights for this, which are supposed to face forward. Let me do this again. I lost control of my. That's why, because it's. Nope, that's correct. I know it's correct because I wrote right and left inside the bubble. But anyway, this will go on, and what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have these pieces here, which have the lights in them facing forward. Now, when you do that, you notice all kinds of issues. First of all, it's not flush. Now, I don't believe that it should be, because clearly these are supposed to rotate so that you can have vertical takeoff and landing. But what I noticed was in holding this up, I've got a huge problem, because I've got a sort of clean right side and I have a left side that is just completely catawampus. So I'm going to have to figure out, now that I've got these sitting together quite nicely, what I'm going to have to do now is figure out how in God's name I get this bar, which has these two attached to it, to sit nicely on this side. Now, one of the sacrifices you can make, and it probably will end up coming to that, is that I will have to cut this so that I can actually adjust its angle, and so that it sits nice and symmetrically with the front of the ship, because it's not doing that now. If you'll notice here, it's doing it on this side quite nicely, but on this side it's just way off. It's off by almost 5 millimeters or so. So there's a lot of work to be figured out there. The other thing is, one of the other challenges you have is, once you've figured out where everything goes, you will notice that things don't fit quite nicely. Now, these balls are supposed to sit in these ridges right here, and for the most part, that looks pretty good. But when you try to turn it over and put the corresponding piece in, you notice that you've come up with another set of challenges. So what happens here, of course, is they don't sit nicely in here. Now I'm fighting with this right now, unfortunately, and I apologize for that I'm not set up to actually hold this nicely so that you can see this, but I think you'll appreciate my reality here. So anyway, when I try to somewhat get these in place, I can get this bottom piece in. It seems to sit in actually relatively fine. And then when you go to put the top piece in, you'll notice it's not even close on either side. So the next challenge you have is trying to seat these nicely. There, you can actually see here what my difficulty is, and that is essentially, and I will try both sides before I start messing with this, but essentially these molds are just simply not accurate enough to where you can plug and play. And this is why we always talk about these, you needing to have a little bit of skill to actually tackle these. And you can see here, I've got all kinds of problems. I've got part of the mold that is stuck inside this ridge, so that's going to have to be removed. I've got a massive hole in the back here. I don't know if you can see this. Probably there you can. I've got a massive hole, and that has to be filled. So all of this has to be sanded, smoothed, puttied, and it also has to fit. So step one is you clean up as much of the mess as you possibly can. And I have to tell you, that's taken about 9 hours. And then after you've done that, you're going to then to sort of start to figure out where all the pieces belong. And once you've done that, then you can start focusing in on super cleanup and fit. Because only until you've got it to where you can actually figure out what you need to do next, it's going to be a bit of a challenge for you. The next thing I'm going to tackle here is some of the engineering issues. I'm going to continue to clean up these with my boring pieces. This came in a set, and I've got all kinds of shapes and sizes to bore with, so that's good. Now, I'll let you in also to a dirty secret. I also have a miniature bandsaw from Micromark, and I also have a miniature band sander from Micromark, and without those, you could spend even more hours trying to clean resin up. Not to mention all the dust and everything that goes everywhere. So using a respirator, as I've mentioned, or trying to be outside or in a well-ventilated area is key. So I'm going to continue to refine the cleanup process on these. And sort of make sure that I've got everything final before we can start thinking about perhaps attaching some of the pieces together. An example would be the rotor here for the rear of the ship at some point can be attached to this tail section, glued. Now I'm going to have to again sand this a little more flush, but that can be glued together, and then we can start puttying and working on the seams. And when the seams are done, then I can replace the grid lines that are lost. Some of them have been lost anyway because the mold just simply didn't penetrate them. Either it was too old, the mold, or they just weren't deep enough in the first place. But again, that's not a knock on the model creator. That's just part of resin building, and I wanted to just sort of share some of that with you because you know, the challenge now is to get these things super smooth and clean, because once you put a coat of primer on this, you're going to see everything. You'll see all of the holes and potholes and nicks and bumps, and so it could take several more hours for me to sand this smooth. But that's what I'll continue to do. And the next time you see this, it should be ready to start to assemble, and we'll go to paint. Now, before I do sign off for this episode, one other thing I wanted to share with you, and that is some of the tools that I'm using, because I've got a pile of them here, and you never know what you're going to use. Now, my go-to handy dandy drill is my Proxxon, and the reason why I use the Proxxon is because you have the tool itself here plugs into your transformer, which does not come with these tools, unfortunately. And let me show this to you on PhilCam. These are all sold as individual items. So here's the transformer that my Proxxon is plugged into, and you'll see I have 3 ports. So tools, continuing on with tools, couple of hand saws, X-Acto ones I have, some chisels. I use 18, and I use 17. So this would be 18, and this would be 17. Really handy because resin is quite soft, and so you can clean up edges, and it's also, these are very, very good when you're using Bondo. Let it get sort of just to a rubbery stage, and then you can chisel it and carve it before it gets super hard. It's a really good tip for that. Obviously lots of sanding sticks, my gators. I show you these on my website, sprueverse.com, if you're interested in the gators. These are great little sanding blocks. They work in your hand amazingly, and they have Velcro on the back, so they're interchangeable. They work really nicely. And of course, you need some pin vices. You need a couple of cutters. Don't use your best sprue cutters for your plastic kits on this. It'll just dull the blade in seconds. So an old pair of Xerons here, but are sharp enough and heavy enough just to use to chip away at things. And different sizes of files as well, all kinds of different files, and angled files and small files, little pin files. I mean, this is why I say you do need a war chest on your bench. And what I would say to you is this: if this is something that really interests you and you want to dive into one of these kits, and you've got a budget of a few $100s above and beyond to spend on some tools, get the kit, look at it, go through all the pieces, figure out what you may need or may not need, and start adding those tools to your war chest. And slowly you'll sort of have enough of an inventory of tools to where you can really tackle these and do it in a way that is enjoyable. Because without the right tools, it doesn't matter whether you're model making or whether you're doing carpentry or plumbing, or I don't care what it is you're doing. If you don't have the right tools, it makes the job extra difficult. A couple of other things I'll say about resin before we sign off on this episode, and that is, it is incredibly soft. If something is is seriously warped, you can put it in hot water, and it will allow you to sort of flex it back into a certain kind of position. So that's always a good tip. The only other thing I'll say is you obviously need several kinds of putties to clean up a lot of this stuff where the molds have they've just not finished nicely. So I use a combination of things. Sometimes I use a little CA glue, which is what I had to do in the corner of this of the seats. There was just a massive hole in the back, and when I say massive, I mean it was the size of a toothpick. You could push a toothpick through it. So what I've done is I dropped some CA glue in there, and I used a little bit of zip kicker, and right away that will it'll completely close up that hole. And then what I'm able to do then is just sand that down, and that'll paint nicely. So that's good for little pop marks. As you look at some of these things, you'll notice there's all kinds of little issues I've got. Now, sometimes you can get away with it, because if it's in a joint where a bevel or something else is going to cover over it, then you're fine. But if it's something that's going to be on display and you need to actually close it up, then go ahead and use a little bit of putty. And my go-to for that, of course, is just your Bondo glazing putty, and it works really well. And so you can use it on wood, metal, and fiberglass, and it really bites. Give it 24 hours to make sure it really is hard. Push it all the way into the joints. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't just tickle the surface with a toothpick, and this will work quite nicely. And then, of course, we've got resin pastes and resin putties. So you've got 2-part resin paste, which can be filled in channels and cracks and things like that. As long as you have a surface that you're perhaps trying to fill something up to give it some substantial weight. If you've got a little frame around it or a mold around it, you can go ahead and use a paste, and that'll work perfectly. Failing that, you've got Milliput, and of course you've got your 2-part Epoxy Sculpts, and they work great with water. So lots going on here, guys. Don't mean to overwhelm you, but I wanted to share with you some of the challenges of putting this kit together, so that at the end of the day, when we've got this, which will ultimately look like this over here, as you can see, which is our goal. That's our finished product right there. It's going to be well worth it, and it's going to be one of those kits that we're all going to be proud to have in our collection because it's just unique. But again, wanted to dive into the challenges of working with this stuff, show you where I was, and so next time we get together, this will all be relatively cleaned up. I'll know exactly how it all goes together because that's my next step, and we will continue on. And of course, before we go to paint, everything's going to be put in warm water with soap, soap dish detergent, as I mentioned, and we'll get everything a good scrub just to make sure we've got any kind of release agent or oils off of this before we try to paint it. So that's it, and I'll let you know what I decided to do with this post. I suspect it's going to end up getting cut. I don't know, but we'll see. But anyway, that is it for now. I hope this has been interesting. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find me on the web at spruverse.com. I'm on Instagram at spruverse. You can follow the builds in excruciating detail there. I do share lots of pictures every day. And occasionally I'm on TikTok as well. And if you want to drop me a line, you can, spruverse@gmail.com. I can be reached, and I love to hear from all of you. Thank you for going on this journey with me. As always, be safe, be well, build something, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.